You are listening to 52 Ways, a podcast by Scott and Christian Milford.
This is how you love one another, love one another.
Welcome to the 52 Ways podcast, everybody. Christian has a shirt he wants to show you.
So I'm supposed to actually, this is from my tutor, Mr. Heisch.
He's almost more of a mentor at this point.
Yeah, he's basically he used to be my tutor. Now he's my mentor.
Yeah.
So I don't know if is it gonna be back?
I don't think so. I think they'll be able to see it.
So what are the numbers? There's different time signatures for for violin or
music in general.
Then there's 13/8.
Get close to the mic.
There's 5/4, and there's 9/8. So I don't know how to read rhythm at all. I just realized I found out about, I would say a few months ago, by my voice teacher what the top thing was. And the bottom note, I still had no clue. And Mr. Heisch, my mentor, told me that actually what?
The bottom, you still have no clue?
No, I didn't know, but Mr. Heisch told me what it does. He says it makes absolutely no difference on what that is. It's just supposed to help you, like for counting. So it's basically pointless. So
okay. So what's it say at the bottom?
Oh, it says these are difficult times because this is considered to be a time signature.
Yes.
So times is like a pun.
So Mr. Heisch has given you several little meme type T-shirts that are funny little things about music. Yes. He's an excellent musician himself.
Yes.
Mr. Heisch has been an awesome example of how to love like Jesus is when it comes to Christian, because he's helped Christian through some challenges in learning and has encouraged him like crazy, which has made a huge difference in Christian's life. Fair to say?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Heisch. Wonder if he listens to these. I don't know if he does or not. If he doesn't, we'll get him to start. Well, hey, this is the podcast where we look every week at a different passage from the gospel. Right now, we're in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to look at 18 verses 15 through 17 today. And our whole goal is to help figure out from the way that Jesus taught, from the things that he did as he interacted with people, how can we mimic those things? How can we learn those things? How can we become more Christ-like by doing those things? Not just doing them, but also changing our hearts to think that way so that we can do a better job of loving one another the way that he loved us, which, if you haven't picked up the gospel in a while, is a pretty important part of being a Christian. And I feel like in our world today, we've kind of lost track of that. We worry about other things more than we worry about this. And so this podcast is designed to help us refocus on that and hopefully move the needle in uniting a very divided world. And again, if you've read the Gospels, you know that Jesus had a lot to say about unity. And again, we've deprioritized that, even though Jesus prioritized it. So we're on a mission to help fix that. And today we're going to talk about, I think, one of Christian's, favorite passages.
Least favorite.
Right? Least favorite?
No, not my least favorite.
I thought you said it was one of your favorites.
No, I was being sarcastic.
You were?
It's gotten me into some trouble, but it's fine.
Oh, this has?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I'm anxious to hear what that's all about.
Well, I don't know if you are going to hear about it. So.
Did you try to implement this and it didn't go well? Is that what it is?
Not at all.
Okay, so we're going to see if Christian decides to share what he might be thinking and to protect others and to not bring others into the conversation. Maybe it's best that you don't.
Yeah, share. I think that's the reason why we shouldn't say anything.
Yeah. Okay, very, very good. And point taken and fair enough. Okay, so let's take a look at what is happening here in Matthew 18. And this is actually picking up from part of where we left off last time, where we talked about my precious, which is where Jesus talked about bring the kids to me. And if anybody tempts somebody else into sin, then look out. That's a really, really bad thing to do. You might as well tie a millstone around your neck and jump in the river or in the lake. But here we're talking about when there's conflict between two believers.
Dad.
Yep.
Do you see that BMW or that Volkswagen?
Down at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
You like that?
No, it looks really weird.
Yeah, it's
like a Nissan Cube.
It's like a wimpy looking car.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why'd you bring it up?
I don't know. I just saw it.
You got distracted?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So squirrel. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was talking about this passage. So I'm thrilled that this came up in the timing that it did. Just a week or so ago, I was talking to somebody and they were telling me about their church and how their church recently split. And the root of the split was the big argument around face masks. Now we're going to get into a big face mask conversation here. That's not the point. But the point is, within the church, we have a lot of conflict and we have a lot of division. This unity that Jesus sought for the church is not a reality in a lot of churches and across the church body overall. There's a lot of division. It's not just us versus them in terms of Christians versus non-Christians, but many times it's Baptist versus Methodist, and it's even Methodist versus Methodist, or Baptist versus Baptist, and it's Christian liberals versus Christian conservatives disagreeing. There's not a lot of unity. Everybody thinks they're right and everybody else is wrong, and that's how it is. Now, this passage is less about the church overall, and it's more about individuals who are disagreeing. And it's when somebody
more about
believes,
proving someone wrong.
well, it's about holding somebody within the church. So not a non-believer, but a believer. If you've been wronged by a Christian, this is guidance on how to handle that situation. It's not a promise. And Christian, this is probably important for you to just accept, I guess, but it's not assurance that it's going to all go well, but it is direction on how to handle these situations. So let's take a look. You want to read it? You want me to?
I'll read it.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay.
I may stop you. I'll warn you.
Why?
You know, if I want to say something
If
about,
you want to point out the other ad, a Nina cloth.
no, we're not going to worry about
Cloak?
Nina
Sorry.
cloak, whatever that is.
Okay. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense.
Okay, let's stop right there.
Okay, whatever.
So there's a couple of key words here. So if another believer sins against you, right? So not just if they make you mad, not if they irritate you, but if they sin against you. So this is like something significant against you is what
What's
they're
the
really,
definition of sin?
well, something that, well, you want to get into that again? We talked about that several weeks ago. If they sin against you, if they do something that is sinful against you, and typically a sin is something that hurts another person. So they do something hurtful, they lie, they cheat, they steal, those kinds of things is what we're referring to here. It says go privately and point out the offense. Now, why do you think the word privately is important there?
Oh, I think it's very important because I think with social media, it kind of does the opposite. I think where everybody can see everything, that if someone points something out, like it's for the public domain. I was once in a literature class, and it's kind of a side note, but there was this poet who we talked about, who what he would do is he would write this, he would write like poems and stories, and he would throw them in the trash. Then he actually became a teacher, a writing teacher, and then he had their students do that. So my teacher had us do that and then told us why. It's basically trying to help you change your mindset of everything that you do isn't for public approval. Do you get that?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, don't be a Pharisee
Like
and make big prayers in the streets and
kind
somebody
of,
applauding you at everything that
to
you
get,
do.
yeah. So kind of with this, if don't go like tell the whole church, this person sinned against me and I've been wronged, and be the victim of all this stuff, which you may be the victim, but first God says, or Jesus says, to go in private and talk about their offense that they made against them.
Yeah, so let's not go blow something up and make a huge public spectacle
At first,
of it.
you can do it later.
At first, yeah. And at first, let's not do that. Our goal is to settle this dispute privately and appropriately and maintain the integrity of the relationship and allow the other person to maintain, their sense of like humility and not feel like they are, humiliated in front of everybody. So the next line, what's the next line say?
By the way, with the humiliation, typically if you become humiliated by one person, it's not as big of a deal as if you get humiliated by 50 people.
Yeah.
Oh so it's a word of advice that actually works in general to actually make so that person will maybe agree with you and say, yeah, you know what, I did sin against you. I'm sorry for that.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully they will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh,
keep going.
Okay. But if you are, is that the, no,
but the other person.
But if the other person listens and confesses, you have won that person back.
So that's the goal, to win this person back. And, whether it's to win them back in terms of your relationship, or whether it's to win them back to God. Previously, right before this, there's the passage about the little lost lamb, the one lost lamb. So if you have was it 100, I think, sheep, and one of them gets lost, guess what the shepherd's going to do? They're going to go find that one lost lamb. And so here it's another way of finding the lost lamb. It's going to them and openly discussing the sin or the offense, and then bringing that person back into the fold. So that's the context that Jesus is teaching with here. Keep going.
But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you have said that has may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses.
So that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. So why is this important?
That was kind of how the law worked back then. I think it was if 2 people are like there for something, then like it's like verified.
Yeah.
But it kind of wasn't a very good law because 2 people could just conspire against one person and then just say, hey, you did something wrong. And then
but I think, there's wisdom in it though. And it's a way to try to handle a situation fairly with somebody, because we all have our own biases and blind spots. And it might be that we think somebody sinned against us, but maybe they didn't. Maybe we just felt like they did, or we, misunderstood. Maybe there was a piece of information we didn't have that explains what happened. So if you bring somebody else into the conversation, maybe you get more of an objective perspective and they can help to point those things out. But I think it also brings another layer of accountability in where the person's like, oh boy, Christian's serious about this. Like he's bringing Scott and Sarah into the situation. And that means that now the ante has been raised and there's more people involved. So I think it does a couple of things here, but I think it's a way to be fair, because we are blind to many of our own misunderstandings and the assumptions that we might make unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a way to be fair to the person. And again, this is all about how do we treat others, and Jesus is teaching us here how to handle these delicate situations.
Yeah, how do we treat others, and we'll find out how to treat them in the last few.
Christian is ready to kick some butt here. Okay.
Are we at
17?
If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then I thought you were gonna
I'm good. Go ahead.
Shut me up or something. Okay. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or corrupt tax collector.
Yeah. So if they still refuse, Christian says it's game on.
It's game on.
So what does that mean to treat them like a pagan or a corrupt?
Well, how do they treat pagans or tax collectors?
Well, how did Jesus treat pagans or corrupt tax collectors?
Oh, come on.
And I want to point out at this point, think about who's writing this.
Matthew.
And what is Matthew? What was Matthew?
Oh, he's probably like, I'm just maybe not going to write that.
He was a corrupt tax collector. Now, how corrupt he was, I don't know. Well, I mean, I think they assumed all tax collectors were corrupt. Whether Matthew was like one of the worst or not, I don't know. And we know he was despised, but like, was it just because he was a tax collector, or was he really one of the worst ones? I don't know. But it's interesting here that but he's also just recounting Jesus's words. So it's not like he's, putting words in Jesus's mouth, because these are quotes.
Scribble it out.
Yeah. But, there's no way that he's writing down every single word, word for word, exactly as Jesus said it, but he's pretty close here, I'd say. But that's part of the context, is tax collector. And what did Jesus do to Matthew? He called him in to be one of his 12 disciples. So I feel like there's a little bit of a like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that we should still be forgiving, or does that mean, because the pagans as well, Jesus is here to save everybody.
And what did God do to the pagans?
What did God do to pagans?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about?
What did God do to the pagans?
Well, he did a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
When?
Not very nice things.
Yeah. But we're talking about Jesus, and how can we learn to love the way Jesus did when he was here on earth? And, Jesus was very forgiving. Now
but there's not time to love. This
gets into, the issues of salvation and, like coming to faith and believing that Jesus is Lord and all of that. Then you're not a pagan anymore once you accept him as Lord. But I think the point here, though, is that, okay, once you bring it to the church, if they still don't confess, if they still refuse to listen, as it says, then
kick them out.
Then I think they get kicked out. And then basically at that point, they have some work to do in their heart to be able to really, be a follower of Christ. Because if you are a changed, transformed follower of Christ, then you're going to be eager to eradicate sin from your life.
If you see them on the street, spit at them.
I'm not going to recommend that you spit at them.
That's what they did to the tax collectors.
Well, that's not what Jesus did. Did Jesus ever spit at anybody?
We did say, "Go away, you dog."
Yeah,
So,
he called somebody a dog, but then
Yeah.
he healed her daughter.
oh,
So I think the idea here is, how do we treat pagans and corrupt tax collectors? We still love them. We still use the fruits of the spirit to help guide our actions towards them, but we also have to hold them accountable. And I think that's the point that we're making here, is that they are held accountable. And I don't think they're going to be appointed to be a deacon or an elder anytime soon in the church.
so you think that if person does not repent of their sins against that other person, then they should be still loved, but kicked out in a loving way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it is held accountable, but still loved. They are still loved by God. They're still loved by Jesus, and he died for that person just like he died for you and me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I have a question. So you said, like, we can see how we should treat the pagans and the corrupt tax collectors based off of how Jesus treated them. But did Jesus treat Matthew like did he kick him out of the church like you were saying that we should do?
He brought him into the church.
Yeah. So technically that's contradicting what you just said.
Well, maybe it is.
It is.
I wish I had all answers in black and white form for you.
So I think that actually, I think that you're wrong. And what we should actually do is, that is the point where God makes a line, Dad, where we are told to give him, I would actually call it tough love. And honestly, kind of like doing like a mini excommunication, saying, if you don't turn from your ways, well, we're kicking you out right now. And unless you repent of your sins, you're not coming back here.
Yeah. So there's a lot that comes to my mind when I hear you say that. I get what you're saying. I totally do. It makes sense based on what we're reading here. I think there would be a very large number of people kicked out of the church today if we applied this rule in very strict fashion.
No, but there'd be a lot of more people who'd come back, because they would realize, oh, they're serious about this.
Yeah.
It's not something where I can just go to church and just do whatever and listen to a sermon.
Yeah.
This is the way that I'm supposed to live.
Right.
And if I don't live like this, I'm going to get kicked out.
And I think that there are people that, whatever the sin is, they would maybe it's like the rich young ruler who didn't want to go sell everything. Some people, when they're faced with what is the price of being a Christian, so to speak, being a Christ follower, they're like, nope, I'm out. I don't want that.
Well, this is different between sinning against you and sinning in general.
Yeah. Well, but I think, my opinion is all sin is against somebody.
But God says that a rich man, there is a greater chance of you finding a needle in a haystack than a rich man going to heaven.
Yeah. And usually because the rich tend to oppress those who are not rich.
But we know a lot of rich people that aren't horrible.
And they found their way through the eye of the needle.
What? Well, I would say I know more rich people who are Christians than are not Christians.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like a needle in the haystack type of thing. That's like
Yeah.
more of a half and half.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Sorry, I'm putting you in a lot of corners right now.
No, it's good. I don't claim to ever have all the answers, but I just know that the idea here is, when somebody is not willing to confess or accept what the decision is of the church, that, yeah, maybe they are excommunicated. But I also think grace is bigger than this. And I think that person, once that heart change has occurred, will be welcomed back into the church with open arms. Now, it's also good to point out that the next week of this podcast is going to be the portion that follows right after this. And guess what it's about?
Probably loving one another.
Forgiveness.
Mm.
So Jesus continues to hit home this topic of forgiveness. And it's just interesting that right after we hear this idea of how to handle conflict, we hear the parable of the king who forgave the debt, the big debt. And then that person that had the debt was very thankful, but then went off and held another person who had a smaller debt against him, held them accountable. And then the king said, boy, you did that wrong. We're going to put you in jail and torture you. And then the parable says that that's how God is with people. So if you don't forgive others, after you've been forgiven, then God's going to be very unhappy with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a coincidence that parable follows this idea, or this direction we have in the church. We are still to be forgiving. This thing with the pagan and the corrupt tax collector, it is not a license to hold a grudge and to be ugly to people.
It's not a grudge.
It's not as much. I didn't mean grudge. I mean, it's not a license to be ugly to people.
You don't have to be ugly to people. You can.
Spitting on them counts as ugly.
I was joking.
Okay. What else?
I was joking.
You were joking.
Yeah.
Well, but respond. So you painted me into some corners. So I'll throw a little paint over your way. So how do we reconcile this idea that, yeah, we're still to be, treat them with, I don't know, respect and peace and love and kindness and gentleness and all these things. We're still to treat them that way. And we have direction that we're able to treat them like pagans and tax collectors.
Well, you quote the Bible to them and you say that, look, it says right here how I'm supposed to treat you. And I've already went public with the church with this problem that we've been having. And you still haven't repented. So right now in the church and I have all decided based off of the Bible that I'm going to kick you out of the church.
Yeah. So what comes to mind, and I think this is where I sort of, find myself settling with wrestling with these hard questions like this. Andy Stanley has a really wonderful question that he asks in a lot of sermons. And it's this: what does love require of me in this situation? I get the hiccups. In this situation, what does love require of me? And he asks that question all the time. And I think that we can apply that question to this. When the situation where you've gone through the appropriate steps to hold a fellow believer accountable, and they continue to say, nope, I'm not at fault, and I don't respect the decision of the church. I think when you say, what does love require of me in this moment? It does require tough love. It does require you to hold them accountable and say, look, until you come to terms with what you've done and where you are in life, what the condition of your heart is, you can't stand before God. You can't be in the church. You're not there. You're not truly letting the love of Christ transform you.
Then again, that begs one of the hardest questions in Christianity.
Okay.
Do you want me to say what the hardest question is?
What is it?
You sure? It'll make you all depressed. So
what is it?
Do you have to have everything right in the Christian faith in order to go to heaven?
No.
It says right here that if one person thinks that doing this other thing to this other person is okay, and then this person says, look, I'm going to kick you out of the church if you don't repent from it, and they say, well, my beliefs in the Christian faith says that it is okay. Well, God says that you're going to be kicked out of the church if you don't repent of it.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. It doesn't say that you're not saved.
If you're kicked out of the church, I think that's the definition of saying that.
No, it didn't say kicked out of the church here. It says treat them like a pagan or a tax collector.
And what did they let the pagans and the tax collectors in the synagogue?
No.
Okay.
So yeah, I know what you're saying.
That is the parallel of kicking them out of the church.
And remember, we are still during Jesus's life here. So he's teaching to a group that the idea of salvation through faith alone is not something that they understand at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're kind of in mid teaching here as far as what all this might look like. So I think the point is we can hold them accountable. Whether or not they end up in heaven, we'll let God figure that out. But I think in the meantime, our job is to continue to love them the way that we love others in all situations. But sometimes love requires us to draw a line, like you said, and that's going to help a lot of people move to a better place in the condition of their heart. So this is a tough one. I know it, but let's leave it there for now. We need to close this session down, and then we'll get into maybe the rest of it in the next section, or the next session, which will be next week, where we'll be talking about forgiving at a cost. And we're just going to pick up this passage. It starts with verse 21 next week and all the way through 35. So kind of a longer passage. But I think it'll help add a little bit of context into what we're talking about today. This was a hard one today, and I hope that you found some value in it. And I hope that even when people have wronged you, you still are able to use fruits of the Spirit like self-control and peace are the ones that I pulled out for this one. Your goal is to win them back. Your goal is not to have vengeance on them because they sinned against you, but your goal is to win them back and to follow this direction that Jesus has given us and how to love them.
Hey, Dad, I have a question.
Yes.
What are we going to do if this is a leap year? It'll be like 53.
Well, this is not a leap year.
Oh. Never mind.
So we don't have to worry about it. This is 2022. I think 2024 is the next leap year.
We're going to run into some
53 ways, and it'd be a mess.
Yeah.
Actually, it may not be because it's only adding one day.
I thought it was 4.
No, it's adding February 29th.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Whatever.
so, that
Well,
won't
what if
add
it
a
was a
whole
Sunday?
nother week. Yeah, that's possible.
What if it was on a Saturday?
Then the
and
whole
the
world
Sunday?
comes crashing down and this
We'd
podcast
have to make another
ends.
podcast.
Yeah. Okay. We're probably going to need to, because we're having a hard time getting all the way through the Gospel of Matthew. So much good stuff in here. All right. We're going to let it go from there, or let it go right there.
Wait, let me guess. Are you going to say be well, my friend?
Until next time, be well, my friends.
Wow.
Love one another, love one another.